Live. Good morning, Greater Chimdale area. Did I use that joke before? I don't know. Nothing really matters anymore except for life and love. Good morning. I am Victoria Wilder, author of Lullaby of the Lilitu, this lovely book that you see right here. Um, it is a gothic urban fantasy that I am relatively proud of. I'm quite proud of it. I do know that my writing has improved since writing this book and will continue to do so. But since many of us are stuck in our homes, are without jobs, are just kind of waiting for the world to start moving again, we're looking for things to do. And as I say in every video, and if you're watching this, you've already seen this, so I'm going to try to keep this short, but as I do say, storytelling has saved my life numerous times. Listening to stories, writing stories, reading stories, analyzing stories. It's been one of my favorite things. And while lately writing has been a little bit tough for me the last week or so, I have been indulging in other arts like drawing and clay making, like just making random stuff with clay and playing my guitar and just trying to really, and even like building in The Sims, like just really trying to tell myself stories in other ways and show myself creation in other ways. But what we're here for today is to continue our read of Lullaby the Lilitu. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. The last time we were here was Friday, I believe, 3 days ago. So actually, that was Sunday? I don't know. Time doesn't matter. But the last time we were here, some crazy shit went down. Samson went crazy and jumped out of a window, and Rio's friend died, and Yuri was in the vault, and then Rio took him out of the vault, and Yuri invited her along with him to visit Tibet. And that is where we left off, where she and Yuri were leaving Livsey to go to Tibet. They left a message for Tabitha that they were going to be away, and let's get started. You may occasionally, you may hear my kitten, my cat. She's very, very vocal. She just had kittens. And you might hear her yelling at them or chattering, or she might even come over here and yell at me for some reason. But just keep that in mind. She is here doing her very vocal talking thing. Okay, 15. We arrived in October. Another week passed before a young priest found Yuri and me in our overcrowded Tibetan hostel. Just to recap, everything before was in mid-September. He sent word for us to meet him in the hotel's dingy bar with no explanation as to why. We agreed. Yuri and I sat in a darkened booth. Few patrons milled around the near-empty bar. They ignored us in favor of their drinks. The priest bowed his head over and over, dropping to his knees as he showered us with accolades. He said the usual prayers of his kind, fervent worshippers of us earthbound gods. Forgive me. He prayed and kissed the tiny copper macaque hanging from a cord on his neck. Great and venerable gods of the earth, I heard of your search for others of your kind. My ear reaches many places, he continued. You toured the mountains with an acquaintance of mine, but found nothing. I know of where you may find what you're looking for. He waited, and I listened for hidden words. Nothing came from his mind. No thought, no sense of what he might know. Only his fear emanated. I tasted it in his scent, salty with a sour sort of tang. Yuri nodded for him to go on. My name is Tenzin. I come to this city every month to collect the forgotten, the old and the dying sick, people who have run out of time or options. We go deep into the mountains, to the temple of the Order of Vala. Yuri's eyes lit up. I leaned forward. There are gods like you that exist throughout the world, the priest answered before I could finish my question. Here we have the Volandi, a god like the two of you, or so we believe. No one in recent history has ever seen it. I shook my head. The only gods I knew of walked in flesh and blood. You all worship some invisible deity? I asked. How do you even know it's real? He flinched, but reined in his negative emotion with impressive skill. The Volandi appears to its chosen in their dreams. It possesses universal wisdom and knowledge of the future. It heals those who can be healed and eases the end for those who cannot. Yuri stroked his chin and leaned forward. The last time I came here, another acolyte claimed he could bring me to the Volandi. He failed. His lips curled into a dark smile. Can you guarantee I'll meet him? I don't like failure. Tenzin swallowed and licked his lips. There is one who speaks directly to the Volandi. He alone can grant you an audience. He glanced at the clock hanging behind the bar and leaned forward. My troop leaves tomorrow evening. We find traveling in the cool of night makes the journey a bit easier on everyone. I beg of you, join us. You'll see my words are true. The following night, Yuri and I trekked through the Gandhi Shan range with Tenzin and his group of elderly, dying, and assisting priests. We climbed for 6 days, feeding on members of our group as they slept. Tenzin led us to a gigantic stone wall in the side of the mountain. A thin crack ran down the length of it, invisible to anyone not looking for it, even with my enhanced vision. He lifted his necklace and turned the macaque's hand within the mountainside crack. Dirt and rock crumbled from above as the wall split and slid open just wide enough for our caravan to enter a lightless chamber. The giant slabs of stone slammed behind us as the second to last old man stepped inside. The second to last old man stepped inside. The humans in our group huddled together, hearts fluttering. They murmured in the dark. Yuri and I waited. A small light flickered in the distance, too dim for human eyes. It bobbed in gentle slopes as it moved towards us down the long, dark corridor. The copper monkey on Tenzin's neck glowed a low orange in the darkness. He spoke to us in a hushed whisper. A page of the order is coming. Let's meet him halfway. Move forward, and you'll see his light. Slow, shuffling footsteps in the dark. It's going to take forever to get this lot to wherever that page is coming from, I thought. We'd climbed the mountain with a group of humans, but the closer we'd gotten, the less patience I'd had for their snail's pace. We could eat them and force the priest to take us the rest of the way. Yuri's words tickled in my head. Shh, little Rose, when did you get so ferocious? He asked in silence. I've begun to realize just how small their lives are. I glanced aside at him to see him raise an eyebrow. These are broken people. Is it not a mercy to put them out of their misery? I added. Yuri shook his head. We must honor their culture. If the Lalandi truly is a living god, Lilitu or otherwise, we don't want to offend. And if it isn't, then we'll feed on everyone in the temple. Deal? I nodded and we kept speed with the group. Step by step, we inched down the long tunnel and up a flight of stairs until at last we came to an arched doorway. At last we stepped into the bright lights of a majestic temple. Small doorways lined the walls, and lush fabrics covered everything. Sheets of it hung from the ceiling in great, wafting curtains. Frankincense smoke clung to the underground air, lingering in thick clouds throughout the room, while priests and priestesses lounged and meditated on massive pillows, swathed in robes of gold and red. A group of young priestesses laughed like children as they played some sort of clapping game in the corner. Far across from us, against the wall, offerings of flowers and food surrounded a massive shrine. Tenzin waved to the page. Take this group to the shrine. They must pray before they rest. He gestured for Yuri and me to follow him away from the crowd. He led us towards a large circle of pillows where an old man meditated in the center. Tenzin knelt with his arms stretched forward on the ground. Forgive my interruption, High Priest. I've brought visitors. They wish to hold audience with the Volandi. I am not seeing visitors at this time, young one. The old priest kept his eyes closed as he spoke. Tenzin's face reddened as he glanced back at us. Sir, these are special visitors. I think you'll want. The high priest's hand shot up to silence the young man. He opened his eyes and studied me. After a few minutes, he nodded. You, girl. He stood and turned away. The Volandi will see you alone. Come. 16. The temple's high priest moved towards one of the doorways. Yuri and I had both moved to follow when he spun around. No! He raised a hand and pointed at me. Just the girl. But Yuri's the one. It's okay, darling. We don't want to offend this being. Tell me everything later. Yuri's face twitched, but he smiled and bowed. I'll occupy myself with a few of your tasty pages. He turned towards a group of young acolytes, waving over his shoulder as he walked. The high priestess clicked his tongue and signaled for me to follow him through a small doorway. We entered a winding tunnel where the temperature dropped as we walked deeper into the mountain. He led me through the tunnel for what felt like half an hour before stopping in front of a plain dirt wall. He pressed both hands against it, and the wall slid open with the same technology we'd witnessed at the temple's entrance. How did you get this tech? For an unknown temple, you don't seem to have any issues with the budget. The priest laughed. He led me into a vast stone chamber and waved me forward before disappearing back into the tunnel. The door slammed behind me. My breath stalled for a moment as I took in the treasures lining the cavernous room. Glistening stalactites hung from the ceiling and jewels poked out of the cave walls. In the center of the chamber, a flight of stairs led up to a tall platform supporting a four-pillared bed. An elderly woman rested on a pile of cushions reading a large tome. Her long silver hair flowed over her shoulders. Such a small woman. The Valandi didn't seem all that godlike. Then again, neither did I. The one thing I could be sure of, she was Lilitu. Power radiated from her as vibrantly as it did from Cayenne and Sephora. Hello? I walked towards the staircase. My name is... I know who you are, child. My name is Valandi. Her voice reverberated throughout the room, not at all the feeble sound I'd expected. She swung her legs over the side of the bed and slipped her feet into a pair of dingy gray slippers. Come closer. Let me see you. My vision suffered long before the change. I climbed the steps, stopping an arm's length from her. She squinted and stared me down for longer than I'd have preferred. She gestured to the wide, thick pillow in front of her. Her hands quivered with every moment. Does she expect me to kneel? She laughed, a low, rich, and melodic sound. You can do anything you want, Rio. I only thought you'd like to rest. You've traveled so far from home. A smile warmed her face, stretching each wrinkle. Would you like anything? Infusion tea. I shook my head. How do you know my name? We all do. You signed the scroll and your name whispered in all of our ancient ears. I'm going to get us some tea. She pulled a small remote from her bedside table. She pressed the only button and smiled at me as I sank into the cushion of the pillow she'd offered. I knew of you before you signed the scroll, too, though you had a different name. Jolene. I knew now things Cayenne never wanted me to know. The brief taste of Mia's blood had confirmed my name for me, along with a few other hidden truths. Volandi nodded. Cayenne came to me not long after he found you. You suffered fits of feral madness, and he thought I could help you. Unfortunately, I couldn't, so he put you into one of his facilities. She paused as though breathing proved a difficult task for her. I've met you before. She shook her head. We have not met, but I've seen you in my visions. You have visions too. She nodded. It's a remnant of our human gifts. A young blonde priestess shuffled in and placed a tray with 2 mugs and a kettle onto the bedside table. Balandi waited for the young priestess to leave before speaking again. I know the confusion you're facing, the love and fear you have for your father. That's just the problem. I stood and paced across the wide platform. He isn't my father. I mean, in my heart he still is, but he killed my real father, whose name I don't even know, and my mother. I searched my memory for the images. Sephora showed her to me. She was so beautiful. Sephora. Volandi pressed a trembling hand to her chest, and her eyes widened, stretching the wrinkled skin at the corners. I sighed. That's the usual reaction, but I know nothing about her. I stopped in front of Volandi and dropped back onto the pillow. Come to think of it, I know nothing about any of us. Cayenne shares little about where we come from or how we came to be Lilitu. I was human once. We all were. The words echoed in my head, and I wondered for a brief moment if Tabitha had received the message Yuri sent, or was she in a panic that I'd disappeared? Would Cayenne tell her why I left? She'd once offered me those same words. We were all human once. Now it felt as though I uttered a dark curse. I watched Volandi. Her moments of distress seemed to pass in seconds, and she rested now in a movable serenity, sipping from her mug. Perhaps she listened to my thoughts. No tingling sensation tickled my mind, but that didn't mean she wasn't listening. Your priest, Tenzin, says you're omniscient, that you have universal knowledge. Is that true? Valandi smiled. I have been around for a long time, and humans are predictable creatures. I can feel what's in their hearts, and with a taste of their blood, I can know everything about them. You know that. I nodded. It's simple then to surmise where they'll end up, should they continue on their current path. I offer what they need, validation or a warning to change. What about your visions? I see our kind in times of great pain. My face warmed. Had she seen me through Cayenne's eyes when I'd pushed that knife into his heart? I shook my head and stared at my fists. So you can't help me regain my memory? Is that really what you want? I jerked back. Her question echoed what I'd told Yuri that night at the lab. Did I want to know the past Cayenne had chosen to lock away? I don't know. I think if I can remember something from before, then maybe I won't feel like I'm screwing everything up. I stared at my own hands, focused on the deep creases, the fine network crisscrossing my palms. Smooth hands that never worked, too soft compared to Cayenne's. If I could just remember what it is to be a human, maybe I would understand what it means to be Lilitu, to be this monster Cayenne created. Do I seem like a monster to you? Volandi's soft voice washed over me in a gentle wave, and heat rushed to my skin, wrapping me in a thick blanket of warmth and serenity. "What did you do?" I asked. "I projected my aura outward and around you. I believe you call it pressure." 17. The warm pressure lifted. He uses it with aggression to restrict and control, but that isn't the only way. The spirit within us has dark desires, but we needn't be slaves to them. Rolandi sipped her tea and smiled. Lilitu have a choice, just as everyone else does. I choose to guide those with pure hearts, and if that means I'm a god in this small corner of the world, then I accept that. Her eyes connected with mine, kind, gentle eyes. Are you a monster, Rio? I blushed under her gaze and turned my head to hide the red tears threatening to spill over. I squeezed my eyes shut. Is it possible to reconcile with Kyan? How can I return to him knowing what he did? What I did? And how could I be okay not knowing of my own human life, not knowing who I am? You're young, newly born. You have time to discover who you are. She shuffled over to a high shelf on the wall behind her bed. She stretched, standing on her toes, and reached up to grab a small box of wooden matches. She lit a cone of incense beside the box and dropped the match to the ground. She waved the smoke around the room and inhaled, closing her eyes. As for Kyan, you must choose whether to forgive him or not, and whether you can live with his flaws. Your bond is stronger than that of any other Lilitu. I tilted my head. What do you mean our bond is stronger? Do you know how Lilitu is made? Kyan told me. He drank my blood as much as possible without killing me, and then I drank his. I slept for a few weeks, and here I am, in the preternatural flesh. Well, yes, that's true. She seemed to be thinking of what to say next, but even as I focused, I couldn't penetrate her thoughts. Each time I tried, she smiled and shook her head, showing me nothing. In all my years, when an ancient turns a human, blood is exchanged in that manner for a year. It's the only way to ensure the soul remains intact. If the human dies before that year ends, the result is a thoughtless, raving creature that is neither human nor Lilitu. She sank into her bed as she stopped to catch her breath. We've long believed it is possible for a Lilitu and human to continue the exchange for longer than a year, creating stronger offspring. I have no way of knowing. Most ancient Lilitu become impatient after a couple of years, but you have over a decade of Kyan's blood within you. I nodded, remembering what Eerie had told me back in June when he'd taken me to Golden Mornings. Why did he do that? Belandi shrugged. I can't say why Kyan makes a decision. He is older than I and far more connected to the world. His reasons are beyond my comprehension. I bit my lip. Kyan kept so many secrets. He'd said I was never meant to become Lilitu, so why carry on the blood exchange for that long? Yolandi leaned forward and beckoned me towards her with a finger. Now, I have answered your questions. You said Sephora is awake. How do you know? She came to me, I said, wrinkling my nose. Why is everyone so afraid of her? I know she's powerful, but so is Kyan. So are you. I felt their strength, all of them. Being in their presence made the world unstable, but Sephora's power didn't feel any stronger than Kyan's or Volandi's. She is different. She is the first of our kind to walk the earth. Only her brother Samael is as powerful as she. Samael. Cayenne's never mentioned him. Then again, he'd never mentioned any Lilitu outside of our family. Belandi nodded. Samael brought Lilitu into being, starting with Sephora. After them, Cayenne and a young one, Irena, and so on until 10 of us came to be. 10? Cayenne had never mentioned even one other Lilitu, and now Valandi was telling me of 9 others like him, herself included. I laughed in spite of myself. Erie's head would explode. He'd spent decades looking for other Lilitu. With no help from our maker, he had found not a single clue. Now he waited mere feet away from one almost as powerful as Cayenne. Unlike you, she said. We were not bitten. We died human and awakened as Lilitu. I don't know how or why, except that Samael was the first. He slept for 5 centuries while the rest of us found each other. The 9 of us lived as a family, with Sephora and Cayenne leading us. After Samael woke, we separated. Tears tinted her eyes. She seemed lost in a bittersweet reverie. After a moment, she sighed. That was a long time ago. She dabbed the corners of her eyes with the cuff of her sleeve. Sephora said she wanted to kill me. I looked down at my fingers, the memory of her cold touch chilling my bones. She changed her mind, but I don't think she's going to leave us alone. I have to stop her before she changes it again. Valandi clutched her collar and tilted her head. I'm sorry, Rio. I don't know how to stop her. Cayenne had the help of an entire family of magic practitioners. Your family? What? He killed my parents. Why would my family do anything for him? Centuries before your parents, a traveler clan known as the Vagari Frederic put Sephora to ground. Someone decimated the clan, leaving almost no descendants until your mother's family. She furrowed her brows and thought a moment. It was your becoming Lilitu that woke her. That's the only explanation. You were the last Vagari, and the moment you became something other than human, the spell was broken. Cayenne couldn't have known. I stood and paced across the platform. If he wanted to save the bloodline, why kill my mother? Valandi sighed and leaned back against her pillows, exhausted by our talk. Cayenne never had much patience. I suspect she resisted, and since he only needed the youngest of the clan, he wasn't in the mood to negotiate. She yawned. You must understand. He thought he was protecting you from Sephora's offspring. There has to be some way to stop her. The spell they used could be written somewhere, or I searched my mind for an idea, grasping at anything that could help. Cayenne prizes control. He must have created some sort of contingency plan for when she woke up. Valandi smiled. You were his contingency plan, dear. Turning you to save your life. Bullshit. My hand flew to my mouth, and Valandi's brows knit at the language. I blushed. Sorry. I know of no way to destroy an ancient Lilitu, but I did hear a rumor, hundreds of years ago. She kicked off the gray slippers and swung her feet onto the bed before pulling the comforter over her thin legs. There once existed a religious organization which called themselves the Brotherhood of Acheron. She reached into the sky, giving her small body a long stretch before she continued speaking. A rumor amongst the ancients claimed this brotherhood had found a weapon capable of killing us. Of course, no ancient Lilitu has ever been killed, so I assumed it's no more than another religious fairy tale, like crosses and holy water. My heart sank. So you have nothing useful. I rose to my feet. We'd wasted our time. Yuri would be pleased to know of Volandi, but we were no closer to being rid of Sephora, and I still had no idea how to fix my relationship with Cayenne. Despite all he'd done, he was the only father I knew. You call yourself a god, but all you do is sit here, feeding on people who think you can solve their problems. I snapped, pacing the floor. My patience grew thin. Why did you ask to see me alone? You came to my home. How could I not meet the child who made Cayenne love a being other than himself? Not even Sephora had his heart the way you do. The truth of her words stung. Cayenne loved me, despite not knowing how. My hands fell limp at my sides. I fell to my knees beside the bed, taking Volandi's hand in my own. Are we gods? I can't say whether we are or not. A sad smile passed her lips. I don't know what we are. I lived a long life. At the end of it, this was my result. Samael brought us into being, but even he could not understand what we'd become. Can you give me anything helpful? She leaned into the pile of pillows and pressed the button on her remote. The Brotherhood created a series of journals. I've heard these journals are filled with first-hand accounts of immortal beings like us, as well as witches and fae folk. I believe Kyan has one, somewhere. Her eyes fluttered closed, and she sighed as she sank deeper into the pillows. She yawned through her words. The sleep comes easy, earlier for me. Morning comes in a few hours. You and Yuri will stay here for the night. You know Yuri. He signed the scroll. She smiled, her words already slurred with the heaviness of sleep. The doors clunked open and the blonde priestess bowed at the foot of the stairs. Diki will take you to a private chamber. I'm sorry, that's a real laugh. Blondie turned on her side, her back to us, and waved her shoulder. You and Yuri can stay for as long as you'd like. I only ask that you not kill in the temple. On those words, she slipped into the inescapable hold of sleep, and the priestess Diki let me out of Volandi's chambers. Yuri waited by the door and rushed to my side as soon as I stepped through. What happened? Did you meet the Volandi? What was he like? He bombarded me with questions, stopping only long enough for Dickie to lead us into our room and drop off linens. When she left us alone, I recounted my conversation with Volandi. It's hardly fair. I spent most of my immortal life hunting our kind down, and she chooses to talk to you. He pouted, but listened in rapt attention as I shared what I'd learned about our kind. Fascinating, he whispered. He toyed with his lip and sat on the edge of the bed. Before he said another word, Tenzin knocked and rushed in with a half-crumpled note. He thrust the note into my hands, and Yuri prompted me to read aloud. We received word that you've arrived at a hostel in Tibet. I'm sure there's no shortage of food. We hope you find what you're looking for. You should know that Samson hasn't returned since the night you left, and Cayenne has been away for longer than usual. He left on a routine errand a week ago. Please return home soon. We are worried. Love always, Tabitha. Yuri and I exchanged a look. Cayenne had never left home for more than a day or two since I arrived. Was he out searching for me? Samson disappeared over a month ago. If Cayenne hadn't found him or us by now, where could he possibly be? I dropped onto the wide, plush bed in the middle of the room. My heart thudded slow and heavy in my chest. Yuri laid down beside me and pulled me close. We talked without speaking, our minds open to one another as we both came to accept that it was time to return home to our family. Mara Benchip. Hello, Mara. Hello, and happy Wednesday. Um, let's see. We're going to stop there, actually. That is the end of part 3. So we'll be starting with part 4 in a couple of days. Um, probably, let's say, probably Friday or Saturday. And I'll see you guys then. Thank you so very much for being here. I really hope you've been enjoying this reading so far. And if you've been watching this far, I'm guessing you have. So thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your support. If you haven't yet, please like and subscribe so that you can get notifications when there are new videos. I also do weekly write-in videos and occasionally live chat videos where I just talk about stories and um, media and movies and other fun stuff like that. So every now and then, just kind of when I feel the urge, I'm not the most organized person, so please don't expect me to be here every single week all the time because I'm sorry, but that's just not your girl. But I do love you all, and I'm so glad that you're here with me. And I will see you guys later tonight for the write-in if you're there for that, or later this week for the next couple of chapters for the next part. Thanks. Enjoy the rest of your day. And please always, always, always remember that you are loved. I love you. Bye.